5:30 in the morning in Atlanta. Lovely to see you, Lindsay. Thank you for joining us. We've got a limited time this morning, and the reason we do is because it's the final day and there is a closing session, and it starts at 12:20. It's an interactive session. You would have seen it on the program of the day that was sent out to you and it's on our website. And so we need to get right down to it. And this morning we're talking about two topics. When I say talking, we've spoken in the pre-recorded session about the last two shifts that Lindsay has discerned in a church in the age of access. The first shift is about resources, and we can talk about that. And then about halfway through, I'll call your attention to what I think is perhaps the most interesting of all the shifts, and that is a movement from the church gathered, which is our traditional way of understanding church. It's Sunday morning orientated, and it's a movement away to the church scattered. So, Lindsay, is there anything you want to say by means of introduction?
No, it's good to see all of you, or at least to see your names up. And yeah, I think that these two shifts, very different. The main thing being the material financial capital, it's still really important. It's still fundamental. We can't get anywhere without it. But this reputational and social capital are opening up possibilities and helping us do things that we wouldn't previously have the resources for. So good to see all of you all. I look forward to whatever questions or dialogue or observations you have about this this shift.
Anybody want to kick us off with a question or a comment, especially on this morning's input? Kevin, you go first.
Thank you, George and Lindsay. Good to see you again. I'm only just halfway through your video, so your YouTube, so I've still got maybe missing something. But so far, I was really wanting you, Lindsay, to just in one or two sentences define social and reputational capital for us, because it's not a phrase I think we use commonly here, or at least I'm not all that familiar with it. So would you help us with that in simple terms? I mean, we understand the message you're putting across, but give us a precise definition in your terms. Thank you.
Sure. Reputation and social capital. A good reputation, the network and community and communication and relationships of a leader, it is motivating a lot of people, even beyond our individual churches, to be involved in what we are doing. And this does get back to what we talked about the first time, which is being clear on our vocation, being clear on what our call as a church is. We know the large call. I'm talking about the particular call for our particular church, and leveraging that, not just leveraging it, but communicating it clearly so people have a chance to connect in with why we believe God has called our particular church into existence. That's all I mean by reputational and social capital. It is the communication skills with which we speak and engage others and invite them to be a part and share a compelling mission, a compelling why we're doing what we're doing, that invites others to get on board with it and to be a part if they wish, and if this also resonates with something deep in their own lives. And the social capital, yeah, networks, how the broader people we know. I'm finding churches aren't just functioning alone anymore or within their presbytery, or they're functioning with and alongside and in step with other congregations, other nonprofits, the government, etc., schools, whatever the particular topic is.
Can I chip in as well, because I had an experience last year which helped me to understand this a little better. I was corresponding and eventually meeting with a church planter who working for the UPCSA in New York City, and he was telling me that he'd done his research. So he'd been speaking to people in groups, much like Lindsay described the other day when she talked about the church which closed down and the one which started up. Again, so he was doing sort of focus groups and talking to people and trying to work out how he could plant a church in New York City among people who didn't go to church. And he met a fair amount of people who were disenchanted with church. They just got disappointed. There was some things that happened individually in their lives where the church hurt them or just marginalized them or whatever. And so that was that became his focus group. Not taking members of other churches who were attending church, but people who were disenchanted with church. And in the end, he ran a campaign, and it's a little bit cheesy, but try to just understand where he's coming from. They started handing out gum, chewing gum. And on that chewing gum, on the one side, they had a slogan, on the other side, the details of their church. And the slogan was, "Come join a church that doesn't suck. Come join a church that doesn't suck." And the sad truth of it all is that we have hurt people, and some people don't want to come to church anymore. I know I've done it myself, not on purpose, but in order to lure those kinds of people back into a community where they were prepared to hear the story of Jesus afresh, he had to develop some social capital and some reputational, capital, so that people would give him a chance. That was the group. Any other questions? Yes, Andrew, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, Lindsay, thanks once again for your content. The question I'm going to ask could end up being quite broad, but basically to give you some context, so I've been ministering at a church now for the last about a year now, and that church itself that I'm serving at is relatively young in terms of churches that I know and have been involved with. It's only about 20-something years old. And when I was applying for various jobs, typically churches are like, we're looking for a minister that's between 40 and 55 and married with children, has life experience, blah, 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 blah. And this church was open to hiring me, who I'm turning 30 in November, I'm single, like all those typical ministerial kind of qualifications I didn't have. So there's for me, it shows evidence in the congregation that they're willing to change and they're looking for that kind of catalyst kind of experience. That being said, when it came to an option for churches to gather again for us down here in South Africa, the leadership was getting a little bit disenchanted because people weren't coming back. And so they were like, we need to kind of stop making videos on a Sunday and kind of force their hand and force them to come to church. We need to gather again instead of being scattered, And listening to your content over the last few days, if I had to kind of identify myself, I'd probably put myself more in the kind of catalytic kind of leader side of things. And I think the question I've got for you is the church is kind of in half like wanting to change, half not wanting to change. And the question I've got is like, where do we start in this whole thing? And I think I'm blessed and I'm lucky in that I'm in a church that isn't completely set in its ways. But do you have like one or two very practical start with this, or have a meeting and share ideas? I don't know. I'm just thinking now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For me, I have tried to have conversations about change with churches, and sometimes they go, sometimes they don't. I'm finding that that's not the starting place, because sure, everybody says they want to change, and some people do, but the how and the why and the what you'll change into, that's where it gets complicated. I really do find in my own experience, I really do find that rather than talking about all the things that we should do and the kind of aspirational goals out on the horizon, I find that having a real conversation about where we all are. What do we need more of in our lives? What do we need less of in our lives? And these are the existing church people, not imagining on behalf of others, but the existing church people. And why do you think God has placed this church in this particular context for this moment, for right now? I really do. If we can help people's imagination, if it's not already there, go back to the church as an instrument of God's love rather than an object of our own love. Then we start thinking, okay, God, what is God asking of us? And usually it's going to match up with something that we need in our own lives too. And so the starting points that I find extremely fruitful are the starting points of, and call can sound so heavy sometimes, but it's also very fruitful. They're conversations of call, no matter how you phrase it, but they're also just conversations about, and this will be tricky in a pandemic because what we all need is to be close to each other and actually to be physically gathered and to have a handshake or a hug or actually a lot of content that we don't have. But, and so there, yeah, I think obviously I'm with you. The forcing of the hand is not going to work. But what we need in our lives, and even as we imagine forward, what the big issues that are on our hearts that really have captured our imagination, a lot of times there can be commonalities and there can be a real sense of what we as a church should be about beyond the broad, lifting up God's holy name, et cetera. I find those places very helpful conversations. And for right now, I don't think that they're going to go as far, because if you're in a situation like mine, everybody's exhausted and so tired. And so I feel like just actually figuring out how we do healing ministries and contact ministries without actual contact is a good short-term solution, and actually just deal with the right now rather than where we are going to be in 1 year. I think that I think we can peek over the horizon. But those are the starting places that I'm finding to be enormously fruitful, helpful, and about what people can handle, given that we don't know what life will be like in a year and a half for ourselves, for our churches, and we really are in a liminal space. And so that kind of in-between time has to be acknowledged in all of this. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Bukelwa, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Lindsay. I hope you are awake 100% this morning. But my question is, in our presbytery, George would know, in the southern region, around just when you leave Cape Town, there's an area called the southern region. And in the southern region, there's George, Knysna, and all those cities. And one of the issues was to employ somebody called a mission enabler. Somebody to do mission in that area, but to do mission more in Mossel Bay, because in Mossel Bay there is no Presbyterian church in Mossel Bay. But now, this makes me think of two shifts. One, before I ask my question, is the issue of meaning. Because I think our church was looking at a demand that we need to have a church planted in Mossel Bay, and not meaning. So I would like you to tie up those two things on how we can do that. And the second one is that I'm tying to the first shift, is the one of church scattered. I mean, during the pandemic, we're not going to church, and most of us were frustrated and so on and so on. So I'm not sure if there's a mission enabler in that area. How would he start using social mobilization, church scattered, and the purpose and the meaning? And why are we there as a church, as an instrument of God's love? I don't know whether my question is making sense, but that's what I'm thinking, because in our presbytery we're struggling with that.
Sure.
And many mission enablers tried. They tried their best, but we could not move. Maybe there's something. So when you talked about these shifts, I thought about that. So maybe you can just comment on that.
Yeah. I think I'm very intrigued by this. This sounds like a brilliant and visionary sort of move for your presbytery. I'm curious about what the mission enabler's purpose and job was and is. Is the mission enabler simply to, and there's nothing simple about any of these options, but is the mission enabler primarily to go out into the community and minister to the needs there? Or is the mission enabler to build a community in the area that can then also minister to the needs there? I guess one question I have is behind the presbytery's vision, is there a hope that this person will conduct good ministry on his or her own, by his or her own self, or are they actually trying to build a certain community? Because I think that how you go about either one of those makes a big difference. And so in terms of the meaning, I'm reading between the lines, but it sounds like your presbytery or your particular community in doing this and in putting some real resources behind a mission enabler has made a discernment, a judgment call, as acting on a sense of movement of God that says, you know what, we are called to these particular people and to be a part of them and to be with them, and they are us and we are them, and we need to go in and know them better and I can't tell if it's to community organize for a particular purpose or if it's to meet the actual needs in the particular area. But either which way, I do think that the meaning piece, the particular sense of vocation might be there in general and might just need to be focused a tiny bit so that you yourself as one of the leaders of this and so that the others can also be, and you might already be quite clear about what you're doing there. We have so little time that we're all talking quickly, but I think that the sense of vocation, the sense of purpose about that is an important question, because it also helps everybody get on the same page about whether this is working, whether we're living into the mission or whether we need to recalibrate some things. If the idea is this person is a servant of the area, that's one thing, and it's fantastic. If this person is to build a community within the area, it's a different skill set, different focus, and also outstanding. It's hard to go wrong either way, but I would, but it sounds like that sense of vocation, that sense of purpose is there, or maybe is almost there. It just needs to be crisped up a little bit. I don't know, and I bet a longer conversation would reveal that. But the church gathered and scattered. Interesting to talk about this during a pandemic, because we are all scattered. We would like to be gathered, and gathering is certainly one of the first actions of God with the people of God throughout all of Scripture. We are constantly being gathered and pulled in together and then sent back out. And so there, I think that the real balancing act is the call of the moment, and has been for 2 years of the church, as we've realized how much we expected everybody to come to us. And we realize now, no, we are a sent people. And so recalibrating that piece is happening. And I love seeing it because it's leading to some really vibrant ministry. But the question I guess I would have for you is simply, this mission person, what is their actual job? And you've got a thing after this. Maybe we could find a time to talk offline to explore your question a little bit further. But to me, then the response would pivot around whether that person's job really is to go in and simply be a servant, or to go in and be a servant by way of forming a community in that particular area for a particular purpose. They have two different jobs, and it's interesting to watch that play out.
I think from what I heard Buka was say, it's the second one is envisaged. Try to form a community. That's the ultimate aim, is for the person to form a community. Anyway, Colin, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay, for just what you've been sharing and talking about. I just want to pick up on something that we spoke about, and it relates also to the community. And you mentioned being a community organizer and having one-on-one meetings. And I did a bit of training with the Gamaliel Foundation in Port Elizabeth many years ago. And for me, it's also just something that is so key that when you come into a situation, that you have to do that kind of research. Can you comment on that and just how important that is? Because I think many of us, we're so structured in terms of what it means to be a minister and what everybody else expects of us, that we don't do that kind of basics.
Mm-hmm. And the basics, this balancing act is tricky because you have to be with your people in the church, but also calendaring time every week. So the one-on-one meetings that Colin is talking about, amen, Colin, you're preaching the same tune I like to preach, but the community organizing piece places the community at the center rather than any mission or idea we may have about building up the church. It places the needs of the community at the center. It places, and it's just a slight reframe. I mean, we are about those communities. It's just that we can get a little more focused on the church and its own health than the actual mission and vocation of our particular church. And so in community organizing, you just engage the world as it is, and basically sit with the community in the one-on-one meetings. They are building a kind of a professional relationship. They're not trying to figure out who you can have dinner with on Friday night, or they're not building a different kind of relationship. It is, who are you? Why do you do what you do? What motivates you? What's really important to you right now in this particular area, in this particular community? They are time limited, 30 minutes. I usually go 40, but you're supposed to only go 30. And they build, and they easily happen because they're only short. And then you reach out to people, cold call, and then you ask them, hey, who else should I talk to? And you tell them a little bit about your story. But it is constantly being on the look for what God is doing in this community that we're not, and wondering if we are called to be a part of it. And that bent, that going out, finding people, and just really, it can be uncomfortable to just cold call people or to have a friend connect you, but that's what it takes. And as we building this social and reputational capital piece, it takes going out and simply to meet, to hear, to engage another who we don't already know, or to continue the relationships that we do have and build them. And so this community organizing piece, this one-on-one relationship piece, which is a component of the community organizing piece, it flips the switch, and what it does is it makes us less task oriented and more relationship oriented. And I feel like that's an important shift for me, at least, but also for a lot of churches I see. We got very focused on, we need to accomplish this and do this, when in fact, it might very well be that we need to enter into and build relationships that then lead us into certain places as God works in and through those. And so that's why the social reputational capital piece is really worth mentioning, not just because it flips us to make the relationships we build, even if these people will never become a church member, it flips us so that those relationships are key and are central and are what drives and shapes us, because they will teach us much. And I don't know about you all, but I'm finding this strange phenomenon that the newer leaders in our churches, at least one in every community I know, is not a Christian. Now, we're not putting them on the session, but they are showing up because what they're finding in this community is something that they do need or want in their lives. And I'm sure it's God at work in them, and we can't identify that for them. But I am finding, based on just this relationship priority, more and more non-Christians showing up and saying, what can I do? How can I help? And not wanting to define the relationship, but to be a part of the community, at least for a little while. And that's just I want to pay attention to that. I don't know if you all are seeing that, but I'm seeing it in every community that I am close to.
Goodness, imagine a non-Christian turning up at the church. Oh, right.
Yeah. Only after we've gone out and built a relationship with them in other ways.
Lindsay, I just want to share something, and it's something that people have seen many times. I'm sure you have seen it as well. But it brings, I really want us to think about this. So I've been using this slide for about at least 4 years in presentations I've done. It's a little line drawing, and this is not the church. And then you get to the next one. How on earth do I get to the next one? Let me stop share, and I'll move it manually. I don't know how to do that. Then you get to the next picture, and it looks like this. One day in my next life, I'm going to be good with technology. So this one over here, then you go to this one over here. Can you see that one? This is the church, and that church is the church scattered, not so. Now it's a pretty slide. You know, the church with a high steeple in the left-hand corner at the bottom is not the church, but the church is all over the show, and everybody applauds. But we don't have any idea what that means. And I think that your last shift that you discussed with us is really trying to get us to come to terms with the church scattered. Can you help us in any way to conceive of how life will change? Our life has happened on the inside of this fence, you know, and in the sanctuary and in the fellowship hall and in the Sunday school classrooms or whatever we have for so long. We have no idea what it means when you say we have to move towards church scattered.
Yeah. To be clear, one of the things that I want to say it does not mean is that we're no longer also really gathering well. We are. We come back, we gather together, we worship, we have the community, we get reinvigorated for life. We have our relationship with God nourished in ways that can't be done just one-on-one by ourselves in other places. We get encouraged for fighting for justice or whatever. So we still do have these gathering times, worship, book group, studies, leadership meetings, etc., all well planned, all done so that people are all welcome and truly can gather. That is just foundational. It's first and foremost with God. The church scattered, however, and I think we build it into our community life. The church scattered has a mindset that says, that is very mindful and awake and alert to us being sent to particular contexts, whatever they may be. Some of us actually live on the online world and have a community there. And I actually believe that too can be a community to which we are called, where we bring our best skills and our ministry focus. But whether the neighborhood be a physical geographical neighborhood, whether they be your particular social group, whether it be a psychographical group, a group of folks who have a similar interest in skateboarding or knitting or whatever, we have these neighborhoods that we live in. And the mindset of a church scattered says, I am, much as the church is an instrument of God's love, I too am an instrument of God's love and am called to show up in people's lives in ways that actually bless me as well as bless them. And so I think what this means for the church is that we will build back into our new processes ways of encouraging and cultivating that mindset that looks out and says, how is your ministry going? What is your witness looking like? Who are you engaging and why? Who are you not engaging? And is that good, called for, needed? Or is that something that you need to address and correct? And so I think at the session level, I have seen churches, and this is not common yet, but it is catching on quickly. I've seen churches meet for 2 hours. 1 hour is associated with internal matters about the church gathered. The second hour is about the witness, life, and ministry of the leaders in the room and what it looks like when they leave the building, when they are or leave the Zoom meeting, or whatever it is. It is about what your witness looks like in this upcoming week. And it has a very daily kind of grounded feature to it. And those conversations can go a lot of different ways. But it involves church budgets that aren't only focused on gathering or on writing a check to a worthy institution. They can be church budgets which people can apply into and then have access to some certain basic funds in order to be able to do something with the neighborhood to which they are called. And that's just, I know that's very broad. We could get very specific, but it's going to be very different for every person. But the church budget then that can help underwrite some people really being there for certain other people in a way that they might not be able to financially afford is very empowering. And then it's the church at work and not just the individual. And we come back and we storytell on that. And so Bible studies, etc., they don't just have engagement with the Bible and, hey, how you doing? How can we pray for you? Which I'm not trying to be trite, but they also include the, okay, how is your witness this week? And it needs to be rephrased a little bit, but you know how that can sound for your community in a compelling manner. But every time we gather, there is a gathering component and emphasis, but then there's also that focus and equipping for taking our ministry into our workplaces, if for most of our church members, our workplaces or our neighborhoods or the schools or wherever we will be, and really thinking and talking through those possibilities. I'll throw out one tiny last example. We have a business persons group now on Friday mornings. They meet for 2 hours. It is only business people, and it is not a come and go because they need to covenant with each other that the conversations will stay in that room. And basically now they have shifted from getting together, breakfast, Bible study, whatever, to a little bit of that, but mostly they each bring a story, an example of something that's happening at work that they need to think through from a Christian perspective and figure out how they should be in the midst of this. It's that kind of emphasis on who we are as we leave together and having shared witness, being a neighbor, being a blessing to those around us. And it also opens us up to being blessed in ways we couldn't possibly even imagine too. It's very back and forth.
Great. Any further questions? Anybody else have a question? Okay, so we've been speaking about 2 shifts in the pre-recorded session. The first shift is from moving from an emphasis, focus on capital in terms of financial resource, in terms of the suite of buildings that we're in and so on, to a focus on reputational capital and meaning making. I would perhaps add into that mix. Very important to add, you know, what kind of meaning we're able to make. And many of the millennials who become interested in church, if they are interested at all, are interested in the meaning aspect of it. How, you know, what contribution are we making to the world? And then moving to this business of a focus on the gathered church and all of the structures and all of the programs, and of course the Sunday worship, and moving from that to an emphasis on the scattered church, the church that God is already working in the neighborhood, and how we can be part of that. just want to make sure that everybody's content and has had an opportunity to ask all their questions. Okay. Oh, all right. I've got thumbs up. Great. All right. Well, then let's kind of draw it to a close. Lindsay, is there any last remarks that you'd like to make?
Yes, please. First off, thank you. Thank you for your time and for engaging this. I love that George is curious. He's always been a fantastic and impressive, inspiring colleague. But I really appreciate the questions you're bringing and the way of engagement. I do think that this season of discontinuous change is not just a challenge, but it's one that comes with a lot of opportunities. And unlike so many eras of great upheaval that have come before us, we know what is happening. We know that there's just shifts upon us, but God is still vibrantly at work in them. And I wish you well as you figure out what to do with the opportunity in front. The church in all of its forms is alive, well, and able. You all, I hear, are fantastic leaders, and I wish you many blessings. I believe that there are some really, really interesting and vibrant years ahead for us as a church. Even while we are changing, we might actually be changing in ways that may seem tough, but may actually be what we need in our own lives and who we need to be about as well. And so I simply say thank you. Great talking to you all. And I also say many blessings in the midst of shifts. We got this more than we think we do. We really, really do. Go in peace.
Thank you, Lindsay. And thank you for the inspiring inputs over 3 sessions. Thank you also for being prepared to get up so early in the morning to have a conversation with us. You would not have known this, but we've had some important people on this interactive session. I see here even today, the stated clerk of the General Assembly is sitting there with his earphones on, and a long-time friend of mine, and he's tuned into all 3 of these sessions. Thank you, Busi. And also 2 of the presbytery clerks of the larger presbyteries in our denomination. Colin Campbell is there, and Tommy Carey is there from Gauteng, Goli. And they're ministers and leaders of the church. They have been over 3 days, and we've sowed seeds into their lives. And I'm very grateful that they gave us the chance to speak about a kind of church that all of us are not really used to. We weren't trained for this. We didn't come into this. But the world is changing, and it's punctuated equilibrium. It sadly doesn't happen in a smooth process, but in fits and starts, and we have an opportunity to either adapt or die, as well-known South African comedian Peter Dirk Ace, Mrs. Evita Besaidno, told us so many years ago: adapt or die. So it's been absolutely lovely to have these conversations with you. And thank you for making the time, all of you, Lindsay included. And we're signing off now because at 12:20, there's a final session for our Inspire conference. Good. Thank you.
Many blessings. Greetings from your brothers and sisters across the sea. We are good to be in community with you.